Thank you. Hello, everybody in the room and people somewhere in the cloud. How do we get from spaghetti to a new way of managing fisheries? Well, somebody suggested me an alternative title. From the land of the blind to utopia. Utopia, of course, because what we Belgians are trying to do is a mission impossible. What we want is really to replace the common fisheries policy with something completely different. I know this is in most people their heads something like, no, this will not happen. Now we do have the habit when we deal with complex systems like the CFP to improve it, adjust it, fiddle around a little bit, add a regulation here and add a regulation there. And very often it just makes the system more complex and really doesn't make it work any better. Let me give you an example. 3 weeks ago, I was in Edinburgh at a study day where Ms. Vicheva gave the opening speech. She came straight from the plane. She had 1 hour of time and then had to move on. These people's schedules are very busy, and we're always happy that at least they want to come to us to discuss. And she talked for an hour. From the top of her head, she explained the whole policy, and I admire these people. I really do. But there was one thing that she said that kind of surprised me. She said, "Dear fishing industry, regarding the landing obligation, don't worry, we will adjust it a little bit so it becomes acceptable and feasible for all fishermen." And then I think, well, if we're honest, we know the landing obligation does not function at all. And to my opinion, fiddling around a little bit will not make the system work. On the contrary, it will probably get worse. It's my personal opinion. I'm sure many will disagree, but to my opinion, as such, we have arrived in the land of the blind. And with the land of the blind, I refer to all these people who construct a common fisheries policy and very hard work to make it work. And that's the European Parliament, that's the European Commission, and that's the scientists, including myself. I have devoted more than 30 years of my life to contribute to the common fisheries policy in the hope that it will work. But I have to say, for a very long time, me, together with a lot of other people, have been blind for the reality, blind for the fact that it does not function as it should be. And it should be improved. Now, in Belgium, we have this pilot project that is quite promising. We're actually collecting real-time, high-quality, high-resolution, confidential data straight from the fishing vessels. We have 37 fishing vessels of the 55 who are completely going along with us in this system of data collection. And we do this in an atmosphere of cooperation, trust, and openness. I think these are the 2 pillars. We don't need more than that to go to a new way of managing fisheries. Good data and trust. So I can say that today, Utopia, we have found it. It's an hour and a half drive from here. It's at the Belgian coast. So come and visit us. We will be happy to explain how it works. Now, I'll try to explain this whole thing in 3 steps. First, the idea. The concept, how can we manage fisheries according to the Belgian approach? In all humbleness. The second part is data and trust. Now, how do we actually succeed in obtaining this high quality data? And 3, a few ideas for the future on how we could proceed together, because it's really a plea for cooperation from the fishermen through the whole chain up to the managers. I think that's the only way we can deal in an efficient way with fisheries management. So, first the idea. Can the digital twin lift fisheries management to a higher level, and do we need to? I'll start with the second question. Do we need to? I have always been a fan of the EU and of the common fisheries policy. It's thanks to the CFP that there's still fish in our seas, and it's thanks to the CFP that we have a balance, a more or less balance between the capacity of the fishing fleet and the productivity of the fish stocks. Now, problem is that the European Commission has always advocated, always pushed innovation, but to my humble opinion has forgot to innovate itself. because it still relies very strongly on control and enforcement, which was necessary in the early days when there were no regulations. But I think there are other options now that at least we should explore. Now, there are a few problems with the fisheries management. And let's say, just to have a look at the basics. What do we actually need? Well, mesh size regulation. Well, I can tell that from Lisbon to Oslo, over the whole region, that all small mesh fisheries, there is no real compliance with the mesh size regulation. Logbook data. They have a lot of problems with correctness and with fraud. We are dealing with this every day as scientists because these are data that we need for our catch advice. And we are really struggling with these data. Engine powers. Well, I don't have to go into detail, but people who deal with it know what the problem is with engine powers in the vessels. There's no general compliance. Landing obligation, I already addressed it. There is no compliance. Scientific advice, and I look at myself, we are really not happy with the advice we are giving. We suffer from low quality data and high cost. And the consequence is that very often our advice for fish stocks is just plain wrong and not good enough to get the trust of the fishermen, which makes the cooperation sometimes more difficult. Anyway, I think there's a few issues. So the control and enforcement does not really work. Mind that I'm not criticizing people. Not at all. I know that all these people are working. I come here for over 30 years in this building, and I know the people work very hard, really do their best, but I criticize the system. So, and I question if the new control regulation will actually solve the problem. I don't know where it's going to lead to, but I know one thing, that it will not lead to more harmony, more cooperation, more trust, and more openness. So, imagine a fishery without control and enforcement. Very hard to imagine for most people. Of course, you need some frame of sustainability within which the fishery has to function. You need healthy fish stocks, healthy ecosystem, healthy habitat. We don't need regulations for that. We just can observe that, and we do. But within that frame, the fishing fleet should be free to operate as it wants, when it wants to fish, where it wants to fish, and how it wants to fish. Of course, we need protected areas and all these things. That's clear. But if they want to fish with a coffee filter, it's fine for me, no problem. What I do want to know is the mortality each individual fishing vessel is causing. So we need good data. This data can then be processed, and what comes back is management at vessel level. Do we have this data? No, we don't. We don't have good enough quality data for decent scientific advice. So how do we solve this problem of data? Well, the solution is Pedro, he's in this room, and his spaghetti. Pedro is a fisherman that I learned to know quite a few years ago, and I was really impressed with what he was doing. On board of his fishing vessel, he was connecting all these instruments to his laptop, and he showed me what he could do with it. He came into my office, I still remember the day. It was the start of a very nice cooperation. Pedro, nice job. And this is how it looked. So this is what we call Pedro spaghetti. Then Pedro soon saw that it had to be done in a better way, and he developed the concentrator. And the concentrator sends all this data from this vessel to the cloud. And that's when fishermen get nervous. What is happening with all my data? So what you need to actually get this data is build trust. So we have this covenant. Some 15 years ago, we had a discussion with one of our biggest retailers, and he said, sorry, we cannot buy your fish anymore. In 2 years, you are not sustainable. So that's when we said, okay, we need some cooperation to actually make the fishing fleet more sustainable. So the 11th of August 2011, we have a formal signing of an agreement, a long-term agreement between the fisheries minister, my director, the director of the PO, and the director of the biggest national NGO in Belgium. So all parties were involved. The NGO wrote the long-term strategy according to 7 themes on how to obtain sustainability over the longer term, and the fishing industry accepted it. That was a very big step. The NGO telling the industry how to operate in the future, and the fishing industry accepting that. I think for me that was the biggest step, and at that time I thought, well, this can work. We developed a system to measure, to score sustainability, so we could follow up each individual vessel. And in return, we gave them kind of sort of a label, let's say, mainly for market access. And one of the indicators is on data. So if fishermen deliver data, they get a better score. And this is how it works. So we have a fishing vessel, sends the data to the concentrator. So which data are this? It's the scale, for example. So every hole, every fish box that is weighed, we get the information real time, directly. I can see it in my phone. So it's not so it's less susceptible to fraud because it's directly connected to the machine, and the machine that gives the information that's important for the skipper and for the vessel owner for the fishery. So this is reliable information. We're connected straight to the GPS, a gear sensor, fuel consumption. We have new fuel consumption meters installed by Pedro again. We'll give that in all detail. We have a weather station on board of a fuel vessel. We are developing methods to analyze video material. We already have 5 vessels that have cameras on board. We actually give us the information, no problem. We don't need any regulation or no formal agreement. We just ask them and they say, okay, welcome, put the cameras on board. We are working on new methodology to get more information on the ecosystem. Environmental DNA is one example. And we're also thinking of the idea of automatic detection on board of the fishing vessels of fish eggs and fish larvae. Imagine the amount of information that we will get from each individual fishing vessel. And it's not a concept, it's not an idea, it's actually happening now. We're doing it. So it's not an illusion, it's not utopia. So the concentrator then sends the data to the digital twin, which converts the data into information, sends it to user-specific fish dashboards for the fishermen, scientists, managers, and maybe one day we will be able to sell some of these data. Of course, there's a lock on the data that go to the other parties. We need data sharing agreements to be able to work with it, but it functions. So how can we proceed in the future? Well, what we're actually trying to do, a new way of managing fisheries, and at the same time implementing the ecosystem approach. We've been talking about the ecosystem approach for more than 20 years. We haven't really progressed. Well, this offers you the possibility to actually obtain this. The first thing we need to do, of course, is a EU reform, the Mission Impossible, which is a long journey. And we can only do that together. So the European Parliament and European Commission play a major role in that. So in order to get this going, we have to convince people that it's possible. And that's one of the reasons I'm here today. We also would like to continue the Belgian pilot project, or a project at regional level. And we need an exception for the legal framework, because I already asked, can we do a pilot project in Belgium? And the reply was, well, look at the regulation, article so much. Oh, yes, you can, with 2 vessels. Yeah, well, that won't work. So we really hope that people have open minds enough and the regulations that are open enough to actually make it happen. And we really are open to discuss other options with DG Mari and other people involved. Almost at my end. How many minutes do I have left? 7 minutes. Okay, I'll take my time. So, what will this new way of managing fisheries bring you? First of all, good science, which makes me a very happy person. But for the moment, I'm kind of ashamed when, for example, last December, we had to tell our fishermen in the North Sea the sole quota will go down with 60%. A lot of discussion, a lot of problems, up to national television. 2 months later, there's a scientific benchmark for the same species in the North Sea. And instead of minus 60, we go to plus 150%. If I have to explain that to our fishing industry, I get red. So, no, this is really not. This has to improve. This has to improve. So, but with the data we are collecting now, we can. Good science, in the first place for the fishermen, fisherwomen. They are the first users because they need good information to plan their fishery. Up till today, many skippers still use little paper notes where they enter their catches. I mean, the human brain is not big enough to get all this information and process it. We need to do it in a different way. So the science is actually giving the fishermen information on, or we're not there yet, we're developing the models. But the idea is that it gives kind of heat maps on where the fish stocks are, how they migrate, how they overlap, where the small fish is, where the most interesting commercial fishes, where the choke species are. You can use artificial intelligence to actually plan a sustainable fishery for the whole fleet that way, or for even individual vessels. So I think this is the basis, good, decent information. And from that, we get good quality metadata for managers. Good quality, good quality. Fisheries managers do not have to get involved in the details of fishing. That's my personal opinion. Fishermen know how they should fish in the most efficient way. And that's sometimes when people talk about, or when I talk about efficient fishing, people get like, no, we don't like efficient fishing. And then I say, why not? If you fish in an efficient way, you use less fuel, less time, less material, and you harm less of the marine ecosystem. So efficient fishing is a good thing. So that's what fishermen need to do. I think that fisheries managers to actually follow up the whole thing and, of course, intervene where things go wrong. But don't put all your energy in the details and all these regulations that try to manage the fishery. It only makes life of the fishermen more difficult and the system more complex. So I would say you can leave this to the regional approach. Then you get time to actually devote to, for example, negotiate with the British and the Norwegians, which takes a lot of your energy, you know. So, okay. Our perception of the fish stocks and the ecosystem will become realistic, which is today not at all the case. And we can say goodbye to enforcement and fines, and probably an illusion for many people. And the access to the system is voluntary, which means that fishing vessels that want to leave the system are free to go. But then you fall back under the system of the traditional common fisheries policy, where indeed control and enforcement is still the main thing. Fishermen who don't want to be open, well, sorry guys, you will be controlled, you will get cameras on board, you will be inspected, and you will be forced to behave. But they have the choice. So we still need control and enforcement, but we have to devote much less finances and time to it. So, to conclude, I think there is a need for a fundamental reform. I think in all modesty, the idea for the way forward is already a reality in Belgium, and it works. I thank you for your attention.